Hi everyone, my name is Yuan. I'm the Member of Parliament for Earley and Woodley constituency, which is on the east and south side of Reading, and also includes the University of Reading's main campus in White Knights. I'm speaking to you today because one of my constituents, Sherry, wrote to me and told me about the conference that she was organising. And I know that a number of our academics at the University of Reading are also at the conference today. So I wish all of you the best of luck with the conference today and with developing your theme of working relationships. I know that so many mainland Chinese academics have come to work in universities in the UK in the last few years, and we've also had a large number of Hong Kong students arrive in the UK on the BNO scheme. And it's so important at this time more than ever that we develop really productive working relationships across the diversity of our student and academic populations and really celebrate the diversity of different people in our UK universities and the diversity of political views and various views that are present in our universities. I think it's part of what makes them so great. My parents were early career academics before they moved to the UK. And when we came to the UK from China, my parents were also working in universities in the UK, firstly in Manchester, and then my mother worked at the University of Leeds, and she also then worked at the University of Reading. So I can see from my parents' own journeys how important it was for them to have supportive academic communities around them that really helped them as they progressed along their careers in the UK, particularly navigating the difficulties of working life as an immigrant family. So I really hope that today's conference you meet more friends, you find new ideas, and that you have a wonderful day. Thanks for having me speak.
So Helen, the floor is yours. Thanks again for the support.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me get up my PowerPoint and hope everybody can see that okay. Is that all right?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so thanks very much, Sherry and the HECEA team for inviting me to give the talk. It's a great pleasure, and because I lived in China for a long time, obviously my heart is very much with Chinese people. And working relationships has been a key theme. It was important for me in China, lots of issues coming up, but also as a head of department and so on, really important. So what I want to do today is broken into a few sections. First of all, a little bit about the importance and impact of relationships. Then I want to look at a case study and give you a framework that you can use for analyzing situations when they go wrong and so on. And then finally, I'll be looking at dealing with line managers, some key principles, because in my experience, that's often caused a lot of problems, and people have talked to me a lot about that. Okay, so starting off then, just that introductory part. From a leadership perspective, some of the key people in the field point to the importance of relationships. Kevin Murray says successful leaders know that relationships are the engines of success. Frank Molinario from Forbes says in leadership, relationships matter the most. Mark Anderson, relationships are not an optional extra. And I think we all know relationships, when they go well, are great. When they're problems, it's difficult. And a recent LinkedIn survey, if we think from the employee's perspective, a LinkedIn survey recently said that dealing with co-workers, dealing with managers were found to be the two of the top 10 challenges. Same for the Chartered Institute of Professional Development. Found 43% of employees felt their line manager treated some team members more favorably than others. And I noticed that in some of the comments that some of you put on the questionnaire, you felt that you were treated unfairly. Gallup, in that big survey organization, in their 2024 report state 70%, or they found 70% of the variation in team engagement can be attributed to the manager. So from the employee's perspective, the role of the manager is critical in relationships. What impact then does that have? More than 1 in 5 said it was damaging mental health. 22% said they were experiencing harassment at work. A recent British Red Cross study found 10% of people felt lonely at work. For senior managers, even higher, 30%. So Gallup says, okay, they asked people, what emotions did they experience a lot during the previous day? And you can see stress was very high, but also anger, sadness, and loneliness. And in your own, those of you who replied to the, filled in the survey, we can see ineffective leadership and management was one of the highest concerns. Obviously, it's just a very small sample, but this seems to fit in with other surveys. In other words, actually, this is not just a Chinese problem. This is a kind of widespread problem, you could say. So my aim for today is to provide you with a framework that you can use to reflect on your workplace relationships and identify any sources of difficulties. But I'm going to use an authentic case study to illustrate how you can apply it to both understand the issues and find ways of addressing them. And then, say towards the end, explain some key strategies for building or improving the relationships with a line manager. And perhaps to just say, a lot of the ideas come from, and the material comes from my latest book, Making Working Relationships Work. Okay, so that's the introduction. So now I want to tell you a little case study, true one. I know the person involved. So Olivia, British, recently started a new job with a public relations with a PR company in London. She had a lot of experience in PR, and her line manager, Amy, quickly made her responsible for producing a monthly report for an important client. So Amy would set Olivia a deadline for submitting each month's report, and Olivia needed to work with a team of people in order to complete the report. So Olivia divided up the work among the various team members and kept checking in with them as to whether they were on track to meet the deadline, as she didn't want to be late submitting the report. So one of Olivia's team members was a young woman from Syria called Rima, who helped with their Middle Eastern clients. Olivia felt Rima didn't like her, partly because of the blunt manner in which Rima spoke to her, which she felt was rude actually, and partly because Rima regularly failed to respond to Olivia's emails. So tension started developing between the two of them. So if we look at the setting, this was a PR company based in London. The three key people, Amy, who was the boss, Olivia, who was the account manager, British, but she was new to the company, and then Rima, an assistant account manager, Syrian, not new to the company. She'd been there for a while. The problem, from Olivia's perspective, Rima did not respond to Olivia's emails. She didn't give her the information she needed. And Olivia felt Rima was also rude in her manner of communication. Then one day, Amy called a face-to-face meeting of the whole team. And to everyone's surprise, Rima suddenly asked in front of everybody why Olivia should be managing this monthly report. Speaking in quite an aggressive sounding manner, she complained, "She's only new. Why should she be in charge? I don't agree with that." Amy explained that she had given Olivia that responsibility and commented that Rima was coming across as rather aggressive. Afterwards, Amy had a private word with Olivia and advised her not to dwell on the matter and to work at improving her relationship with Rima. Olivia was keen to do this and emailed Rima just to say this was sort of COVID type. Well, it wasn't COVID time, but Rima often worked from home. saying she hoped they could put the matter behind them and build a more productive working relationship going forward. But again, Rima did not reply. So just to summarize what happened, Rima complained about Olivia in a public meeting. Amy told Rima she sounded aggressive. Amy told Olivia to improve her relationship with Rima, but Rima did not respond to Olivia's attempts to improve their relationship. I met Olivia around that time, and she was really upset about all of this and just really didn't know what to do. So what can we do in this kind of situation? And relationships are not easy to solve. You know, it's not as though there's going to be a quick and easy fix to these things. But one important thing is to try to see things from different people's perspectives. And I'm going to introduce you to a framework, the TRIPS framework, that I believe can help with this. So that was the case study, which we'll come back to. But now let me give you an overview of the TRIPS framework. Put in simple terms, I've got there in the middle interactions, what is said and done. And I've told you a little bit about that, what had happened. And then you've got underneath the people and the settings. And again, I gave you a little bit of information on that because that will also influence the interactions. But today, what I want to particularly focus on is the top two, the triggers and the reactions, because that's what upsets us or annoys us. And so I'm going to explain, and I'm going to focus first of all on the triggers. These are issues that trigger some kind of reaction in us that cause us to feel upset, angry, annoyed, or whatever. And from our research, from work in the field, we suggest that there are 6 of these, and I've called them the GAF triggers based on the words in English. So I'm going to just briefly go through them. First of all, goals. We all have goals. You will have goals for attending this webinar. If our goals are not met, thwarted in some way, we will feel annoyed, upset, etc. Second, autonomy. Usually, none of us like to be bossed around. We like to have a certain amount of freedom. On the other hand, sometimes we like to have some direction and guidance. So autonomy is a continuum from high control to low control. And again, I'll come back to that later. We then have attention. We like to people to pay attention to us, give us the right amount, not too much if we don't want that. But we don't like to be ignored. And I know some of you in your comments talked about when you made comments, people didn't really take them on board. They ignored them. That's because we all like to have attention. Then face, I don't need to say too much to all of you about face. We like to be given respect, appreciation, and if our face is challenged in some way, that's upsetting. Fairness, we like to be treated fairly. And again, several of you talked about in your comments that you felt you were not being treated fairly, and that upsets us. And then finally, there's the ethical principles. If we're asked to do something unethical, that will be problematic. So if we summarize that, we've got goals, autonomy versus control, attention versus inattention, face, fairness, ethicality. And the issue is my perspective the same as the other person's perspective? Are my goals the same as your goals? Is your preference for autonomy the same as my preference for autonomy? So that's the big picture. So let's now go back to that case study and see if it can help us understand what was going wrong there. So if we look at it from a triggers point of view, Olivia had her concerns, goals, sense of autonomy, etc. And then Rima had hers. And if there's an alignment between them, then we have smooth rapport. If there's no alignment, they're misaligned, then we will have problems. So if we think from Olivia's point of view, her goals, she had to submit a report and she needed to submit that report on time. So that was an important goal for her. To fulfill that goal, she needed input from Rima, and so she needed Rima's attention. She wasn't getting it, and so that was a problem. Then in the meeting, she criticized or she complained about Olivia publicly. So that would be a face threat. None of us like criticism. So that would be Olivia's perspective. Now let's see, what if we look at it from Rima's perspective? For her, she was saying, why is Olivia telling me what to do when she's new to the company? This isn't fair. So Rima felt the whole situation was not fair, that she wanted more autonomy. She didn't understand or accept that Olivia should be telling her, getting her to do this work. So what we find actually is that people may prioritize different different triggers. So say for here, Olivia was focusing on goal achievement, that report, but for Rima, her focus was on autonomy, and she didn't care about Olivia's. Maybe she wanted Olivia to fail. You've then got people may interpret those triggers differently. What's unfair? Your sense of unfairness might be different from my sense of unfairness. And what we find is that in global context with cultural differences, these differences can be even more pronounced. But actually, these 6 factors, these 6 triggers, seem to be universal, but we may give them different sense of importance in different contexts and situations. So you have a trigger, not fulfilling the goal, not allowing me to, thwarting my goal, or not giving me the autonomy I want. And then you could say we tend to react. So if we think of Olivia's reactions towards Rima, this would be emotional. She felt frustrated. She was embarrassed. She was worried. She felt Rima disliked her. She probably disliked Rima. And I remember talking to her at the time, you know, was Rima incompetent? She was certainly difficult to deal with. So there was all kinds of evaluations going on in terms of Rima's competence, the kind of person she was. And that's what we have with reactions. There's both an emotional side, we feel those emotions, but we also make judgments. And those judgments may be fair or not so fair. Now, we don't know about Rima's reactions towards Olivia. We haven't got that data. We weren't able to talk to Olivia, to Rima herself. But overall, it seems to be negative. That Rima seemed to be negative towards Olivia, and also both emotionally and from an evaluation point of view. Amy, the boss, reaction towards both of them, emotions, again, we don't have any detail, but she seemed detached. She was basically saying, you know, she didn't care about it really. And she just said, not my job, Olivia, you sort it out with Rima. And again, it's interesting, and several of you mentioned this, and I see it in other research. Managers are often wash their hands of situations when, in a sense, perhaps they should get more involved. So, reactions, we need to ask ourselves and then consider the same from the other person. See, emotionally, what emotions am I experiencing and how intensely am I experiencing them? I'll explain why in a moment. Then we need to think, how far am I or the others displaying that emotion? Lots of cultural differences there. How well can I perceive other people's emotions? If I'm upsetting them, am I noticing? And then evaluative reactions. What judgments have I made of others? Maybe what judgments are they making of me? What led me to make those judgments, or what led them to make those judgments? So we need some reflection. Why? Because managing emotions is particularly important to prevent them festering. What that means is that if we feel annoyed about something, we can go over it in our minds, and the more we think about it, the more annoyed or the more upset we can become. And so we have to learn to deal with the emotions to prevent them getting worse and worse and just bogging us down. The research also shows that clarifying our emotions and saying, yes, okay, I am feeling really angry about this, can in itself help to reduce their intensity. But also understanding different people's perspectives can help to reduce the emotions. I certainly have found that myself with own personal examples. When we see, often we're seeing it just from our own perspective. When we see actually maybe they've got a valid point, that can be helpful. And if you want some help, we have a nice little framework in our book, that Making Working Relationships Work, that can help you think that through. Okay, so that might seem kind of negative. That was the problem that Olivia was experiencing and told me about. A number of months later, I met Olivia again, and I asked her, oh, how are you getting on with Rima? And to my surprise, she said, oh, we're really good friends now. So I was quite surprised. So I asked her, okay, what happened? So first of all, Olivia changed her management style. She's not before, Amy just said, this is the deadline. And Olivia accepted that and said, okay, you need to do the work by this deadline. What she then did was, how she changed, she started consulting her team on the report deadline, asked them, is this deadline suitable for you? Why would she do this? Well, each team member will be working on different projects. So a deadline might be unrealistic for them or impractical. So she started that negotiation, and then if they couldn't meet the deadline, she then went back to Amy to try to negotiate a different deadline. Secondly, Olivia had been telling her team, okay, you do this bit, you do this bit, you do that bit. The reason she was doing that was because she just asked them to do the aspects of the report they wanted to write. They were responsible for, should I say. Now she just asked them, what aspects of the report would you like to write? Let them choose. Now the irony was they still chose the same thing that she had given them before, but by giving them the autonomy to let them choose, they were happier about that. So it was really, again, around that autonomy. So if we go back to this and we think, look at it, we said Rima was resentful. Why is Olivia telling me what to do? There is a problem there with the level of autonomy. And what Olivia did, she changed her management style to try and match that of Rima's. So in other words, she was just paying attention more to that whole issue of autonomy. Secondly, there's communication style. Olivia had felt Rima didn't like her because she was sort of spoke to her very bluntly. And what she now noticed was that Rima spoke actually in that same blunt style to everyone. And she began to realize that this was not personal, this was not anything to do with Rima disliking Olivia, but reflected a language proficiency issue. It's not easy to manage those nuances of politeness. So if we go back and see that trips thing, you had interactions, Rima's blunt style of speaking, Rima's level of proficiency, that's the one under the people factor. And then once Olivia had realized that, she didn't take that personally. By putting right the trigger of autonomy, they then developed very positive attitudes towards each other. Okay, so hopefully that enables you to see how using the TRITS framework, and especially the triggers, and understanding how we might have a mismatch on the triggers, how working that through, reflecting on that, can help us and give us clues as to how to manage and overcome the relationship problem. Okay, now I haven't said anything in all this about Amy. And so I want to say a little bit now about handling line managers, because this, I think, is very difficult. Olivia was not really, she was not a line manager to Rima, and so that was not always easy. Okay, so this relates in a way to the autonomy and attention that we saw in the triggers. There are two key dimensions. This is found in psychology as well as in communication. There are two key dimensions of all relationships. The vertical one, which is to do with control, and then a horizontal one, which is to do with connection or involvement. So the vertical one, control, is very well established, where you've got high control, no autonomy at one extreme, and then you've got low control and freedom, you could say, high autonomy at the other end. And then you've got connection. This is a little bit more varied in its interpretation. There's that attention side, but there's also, do I work with others? Do I work independently? And so on. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. So if we think of autonomy, we did some research and we asked people about their line manager, and you can see how in that scatter plot, for those who are more scientifically minded, we asked them, how important is this to you? This is, say, to have autonomy in deciding certain things with the line manager, and how far are you experiencing it? So if it was, yes, this is very important, and I'm experiencing it, then it's going to be up in the top right-hand quadrant there, the top right-hand corner. And you can see there that actually 73% felt that. But actually, the bottom right-hand corner saying, this is very important to me, but I am not experiencing it. You've also got just over 23%. That's nearly a quarter of the people. Now, there can be various reasons for this. This could be the manager's fault in inverted commas, but often it's different understandings and different perceptions as to whether you should have or not. But what it does mean from a manager's point of view, if there's even nearly 25%, if you've got that of your staff who are not happy, that's something that you really need to work on. So how might they be misaligned? Well, you have different beliefs and values about hierarchy and power relations. So for instance, high control, people would believe the line manager has the right to assign work. And the employee believes they should obey what the line manager says. If you have beliefs in low control, you think the line manager should consult with employees, employees should discuss and negotiate with the line manager. Now, if you have people with a manager and an employee with different beliefs, you are going to have problems. So if the line manager thinks, I'm the line manager, I have the right to tell people what work they should do. But if the employee thinks, I should have the right to discuss and negotiate it with the line manager, you will have a mismatch there. But it also works the other way around. If the line manager thinks, well, really, this is up to the employees, they can decide all of this. Employees will feel the line manager is not doing their job, and you will get some dissatisfaction there. So why might people have different beliefs or values here? Now, cultural factors can play a role. So for instance, traditionally in Chinese culture, there is that respect for those in authority. And I can think of certainly one of my former students working in now in as an employee in another university. Her line manager kept putting work on her, do this, do that, and she didn't feel she could question it or negotiate it at all because she felt that would be disrespectful to the leader. And so she was getting more and more work piled on her. And then the line manager was complaining she wasn't doing the work properly. But maybe the line manager didn't realize the amount of work that she actually had. So you can have cultural factors. You can have personal preferences. Rima came from Syria, which according to cross-cultural research is a high power distance country, which indicates she would normally be very accepting of the line manager telling her what to do. But it's too simple to just talk about national differences. Rima certainly, clearly had her personal preference for autonomy. I think another thing is actual lack of awareness or attention. It's strange with Olivia. Olivia, in terms of her own personality, is a very mild, a bit lacking in confidence, perhaps, sort of person. And she's not the kind of person to just give instructions and boss people around. Quite the opposite. And I think what was happening to her was Amy was telling her what to do, and she was like that former Chinese student of mine. She was just accepting it and didn't negotiate or didn't do it. And then, sort of almost unaware, she was just doing the same thing with her team. So it was really, she wasn't paying attention to that whole issue. So that's why thinking about the triggers can be very helpful to sort of identify problems that you might not otherwise have been quite aware of. So thinking of the people who have talked to me before about their problems. So I'm thinking of this person, and I know some of you have also mentioned this, you know, the line manager sometimes gives so much work, do this, do that. So one practical piece of advice would be to ask the line. So it may not be possible to just complain and say to the manager, oh, you're giving me too much work to do, because that might be face threatening for the line manager. But one possibility would be to say, all right, you've given me quite a lot of tasks, and it might be difficult for me to finish them in the time. Could you tell me how you want me to prioritize them? Please put them, you know, give me the priorities for you. And this would link with that notion of goals. Line managers may still be bad about this, but it starts to maybe get the message across to them. They have to think things through. And it's surprising how many line managers are actually burdened by what's coming down to them from above. And so they're not always thinking or aware of the impact on the people under them. They are just worried about meeting the needs of the people who are above them. They're like caught in the middle sometimes. So asking them to try to prioritize can be a very helpful sort of strategy. Another way, if you have time, is to ask the line manager to explain their goals so that you can understand them better. So if you remember, the goals is one of those triggers. And again, we did some research on that. And it's surprising how often line managers don't know what the goals are of their employees. And when I say goals, all kinds of things, career goals, maybe personal goals, as well as work-related goals. But the other way around as well, employees don't always know what the line manager's goals are, or what they're expected to achieve. And you can see here in this small sample that we had, nearly 30% of people did not know or understand each other's goals. And so that again is a really important element to work on and try and understand what the other person's goals are. Having said all of that, sometimes, you know, if you are the junior person or under the line manager, things don't always work out. And so if serious problems persist, my strong recommendation is to keep written records of all meetings and interactions. Because, and again, I'm thinking of, you know, somebody I know, and the line manager was keeping no records and claiming, you know, so for instance, you know, Friday afternoon, the line manager told this person, I need you to produce, you know, a report on this by Monday. And that was an impossibility, because to do the report, she would have to talk to other members of staff, and this was at a university. But then later, the line manager, when she was taken to performance management, and she said this is what had happened. This is the kind of way the manager was acting, and then the manager denied it all. And so there, I do believe there are actual serious problems with line managers' behaviour, and it may sound bad, but I think when things are a noticeable ongoing problem, start keeping written records so that you have the date, the time, the location, and the full details, so that if anything comes up, you have got that record. Okay, so we're coming towards the end now. So just a few things on, if these are issues that concern you, how you might learn more. So as I mentioned before, we have this book, Making Working Relationships Work. It explains the TRIPS framework, but it also, in part 2 of it, has chapters on different problems. So the kind of thing we talked about today, upsetting or annoying experiences. We do look at dealing with conflict, especially with colleagues. Also exclusion. Some of you talked about the difficulty of speaking in meetings, and it can be really difficult, and it's not just a language issue. I myself found it when I was in heads of department meetings. You've got a large room, you've got some very confident, dominant people who are always talking, and it can be quite difficult. That's very much the chair of the meeting who needs to be careful about that. So we have a whole chapter on what can be done about that. And then we have another chapter on each one's getting on with colleagues, and then another on how employee to the direct report to the boss, and then the other way around, boss with the direct reports, with lots of practical, authentic examples in each of them, and activities and so on, and tool templates at the end. If you're interested, you can download a free copy of chapter 1 from our website, globalpeopleconsulting.com/books. Yes, that's just about the tools. Each of the chapters has a specific tool, how you can work through and think through that meeting. If you want to know more on a more personal level, we have a masterclass on the 25th of June online. It's currently on Eventbrite. If you put in the search title Art of Managing People, and then we will be offering more in the future, and you can check those out from our website. And then if any of you are in more management positions interested, we have profilers we've been running with some universities in Sweden and Belgium about team working, how people get on with the team working, and also the relationship management profiler, how managers and subordinates are getting on with each other. And what our whole approach is, very often in a lot of other surveys, they give mean scores. And our view is mean scores is okay up to a point, but it masks a lot of significant individual difference. So if you look at this particular scatter plot, a mean score would show there's no real problem. It's very good. The relationship's very good. But then if you see down in the quarter, you've got a quarter of the people who are not happy. And as a manager, if you've got a quarter of your workforce who are not happy, that's an issue you need to deal with. So, and of course, you can then think, what is it? And I think some of you said that in your comments, and I completely agree. This isn't necessarily just identity. It's not necessarily your skin color or your gender or whatever. A whole lot of factors could be involved, but it is important to pay attention to those individual factors. Okay, so that brings us to the end. If you have any questions now, you're very welcome to ask them. And if you want to follow up, you can get in touch. There's my email address, or if you put it into Google, you'll find it. The Warwick one obviously works as well. And then the website. Just to say, on the website, there's also lots of free resources under insights that you can have a look. Okay, good. So I'm going to stop sharing and then hand over to Crystal if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Helen. Can I just say that I've seen quite a lot of research on cross-cultural psychology, international management, on the people management side, but what I have heard here is really, really insightful and also practical. And this is the gist that I think really, really feeling my goal, thinking about your model, because I think we're facing this on a daily basis. Yeah. So just share a little bit of my reflection and my observation. So in a school that I'm the deputy head for, we have 145 member staff, and then coming from 30 nationalities. Yeah. So the situations on the managing colleagues and also building a high-performing team, motivating them, it happens on a daily basis. And that negotiation skills that you mentioned in your talk, it's really, really critical, whether it's for us as a, member staff, or we as a middle manager or senior leader, it all matters, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
One of my particular observation I really echo that is in my field of research in human resource management is about that, what you mentioned about the mismatch of goals. So in the literature, in what I have seen for employee engagement, so when your personal goals match against the organizational goals, and that where the staff are happier and more engaged, so they tend to get on to build on more collaborative work. So I think that echoes what your research is. So that's really, really helpful. So after these two observations, I have a particular questions about culture that you mentioned, particularly for this case study. So my question is that, so there are clearly the culture that is a PR company operating in London, and then with people from British culture, and then with Rima from Syria. So what is the organizational culture in that PR organization? Were they and the leadership style, were they very a flat type of organizational culture? Was it very hierarchy? I was just thinking about, the national culture and organizational culture, leadership style, they all kind of different level have a impact.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know the company well, but Amy, it was a small PR company, but I would say it was very flat. And Amy, if you think of that, the what we call the interpersonal circumflex, or the circle, she was low control. She basically sort yourselves out. I'm not going to be bothered with this. I think the other thing, though, and I think in cross-cultural management, you have, as you say, the different levels for setting. So you've got the national culture, you've got the organizational. For us also, there's another level, the micro level, which is the event. So like with meetings, there will be different norms as to who can speak when, how freely you can speak, etc. And it seems that Rima broke those norms by being critical. Now, having said all of that, what seems to have happened is that Amy never explained to Rima or the other new members of staff what Olivia's role was, what level she was coming in at. So I think there was a failure actually at that management level. So clearly Rima genuinely did not understand, why is this person telling me what to do when she's new and I've been here a long time?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, that also comes to management needing to explain things clearly to the staff, you know. So as I said, she came in at a higher level, but she wasn't, you know, in these organizations where you have different clients and so on, you have team members that you're not actually in a management role with.
Yeah.
But managers just decide, and I see this in my son's companies as well, you know, managers say, okay, you're working on this project, this is your new client, and in a way you don't have much negotiation over that. But I think Amy failed in not giving those details. I think if you step back, and I have I didn't talk about that today. I used this example with a set of interculturalists and asked them to reflect, you know, what was the source of the problem? And it was very interesting. One person said, I don't understand why Rima was so upset. She's from the Middle East. That's high power distance. She should just accept what Olivia told her. Wow. Another person took a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective and said they should never have employed Olivia. They should have trained Rima to fulfill that role.
Yeah.
And then somebody else said, you know, Amy was at fault because she was too hands-off. She was laissez-faire.
Yeah.
So what you have is you've got all people giving all kinds of explanations, you know, and actually they were much more individual in a way. And so in my latest sort of thinking is what you have is, yes, you've got those cultural norms at the different levels, national, organizational, but micro with the communicative event. But then if you think of Schwartz and he talks about the press of culture, that you then have people's personalities and preferences and personal goals. It's sort of, those affect it, as it were, that press of culture as it goes through to the actual interaction.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for the analysis. I think this kind of touch upon one of our colleagues here's question, but I have loads of questions, but I just wanted to say what I found it really helpful is the model kind of dissect it in a step-by-step and also logical way, because usually even myself, my colleague, what I've seen, when you get into the kind of situation, you react emotionally.
Exactly.
Without thinking the step-by-step approach. Yeah. So I think I'm going to lead this conversation now to our first question from the audience. All right, is that my side talking? So personally, I've learned a lot, and then really appreciate, Helen, you share your research and also those practical tips and those wisdoms is really helpful on the daily basis for us to think about it, reflect calmly, and then deal with situation when you come along. And also, I think, also want to thank everybody who joined today's event and then engage with the process, whether it's the survey before the event or during the discussion.